Welcome to the Leather Journey, and today we're just going to have a fireside, or in this case, a candlelight chat about a little bit about leather houses, but primarily about House Mermaid and what House Mermaid was. I am going to do a video and discuss being outed in the scene and job protection, and maybe another video on public rules of conduct. But to make a long story short, I entered the lifestyle in the Hampton Roads, Virginia area 23 plus years ago. And my first year in the lifestyle was spent in Hampton Roads. And during that first year plus 2 or 3 months, about halfway through that year, I was outed at work and ended up being moved to a different job and did a job search, a job hunt, and ended up landing up in upstate New York. So being introduced to a leather house in Hampton, Virginia, and then having to relocate a year later to upstate New York, I naturally looked for leather in the Capital District area of upstate New York. And I found some BDSM groups, but I didn't really find leather the way I experienced it in Hampton Roads. And I was also very much sensitive about not losing another job, because even though I didn't lose the job in Hampton Roads, once I was outed, I was shuffled into a desk job that essentially was a dead-end job and not working up to my potential. It wasn't fulfilling, for sure. So I landed a job as a professor in the Capital District area, and I was concerned, of course, about protecting that career and not being outed a second time, and actually hopefully surviving to tenure and completing a career as a college professor. So I looked for ways to protect that career, and one of the first things I went back to was the leather house concept that I had been exposed to and experienced that first year in the lifestyle in Hampton Roads. And so what is a leather house, or what was House Mermaid? Well, all leather houses are different, don't get me wrong on that one. I won't say there's a right way and a wrong way to structure a leather house, but why have a leather house? I'm going to put a link below to an article that actually Laura Antoineau wrote, kind of a tongue-in-cheek or view of leather houses and how they're kind of made at structures and organizations. And on one hand, she is right. She kind of takes the position in her article, and I certainly welcome you to read it. The link will be below. That they don't really form a function, at least in her paradigm. I would contend they do. They're not for everyone, and you certainly can create and navigate a leather journey without being involved in a leather house or being part of a leather house. But what was House Mermaid, and what function did it serve for me? It was an attempt at trying to protect my career. So the leather house structure was, at least in that house, was myself and my 24/7 submissive. We located a large Victorian that was for sale in upstate New York, kind of out in the country, kind of rural. It was actually quite a drive to work every day, but we felt like we were far enough from my place of work that we could safely live our lifestyle. And it was a big Victorian. It had 4 bedrooms, 5, depending on how you defined one of those bedrooms. But what it had was an attic, a full attic, and it had a full dormer. One of the dormers was actually an 8 by 10 room. So the main part of the attic was 25 feet by 43 feet long, and the peak in the attic was an 11-foot peak. The cellar was essentially the same size, and of course the The cellar wasn't 11 foot tall, but it had an old water cistern in the cellar. And on one side of that water cistern, the wall had been knocked out because it hadn't been used to collect rainwater in probably decades. And the steps were built to go down into the bottom of the cistern. Well, the cistern itself was an 8 by 10 room. If you were standing on the floor of the cistern and looked up, your floor joists above were 14 feet from the floor to over your head. So what was that? A perfect place for a hard point or hard points to do suspension. People could stand around the walls of the cistern and look down in on play that was happening inside the cistern. So it was a perfect house for us to build 2 dungeons. I built a large attic dungeon. I built a large cellar dungeon. Didn't do it all by myself. We were very much interested in education, as obvious from these 2 channels that I produce on YouTube. But lifestyle education, we wanted a safe place to play and have play parties. And we wanted some of that closeness and that energy and ambiance that I'd experienced the first year in Hampton Roads. So literally the summer of 2001, myself and a lifestyle friend and a few other friends contributed. Extended family members built 2 dungeons. The total square footage was about 2,500 square feet. And once those dungeons were built, we, on the 3rd Saturday of every month, would host a play party at House Mermaid for the community. But we were careful, or tried to be careful, of who we invited in. It was only people that we had vetted and had gotten to know and felt like we could trust to be discreet coming and going to the house, and also discreet about what went on in the house after the party. Lack of discretion would just get you taken off the invite list. So the Leather family that evolved, we ended up having 17 extended family members, and most of those were couples. Myself and Barbie would approach a couple and usually go out to dinner with them and talk about the house and what our vision and our dream was for the house, and ask them if they wanted to be a part of that and share a part of that. So family members were invited every month and encouraged to come to the party. And we would have field days twice a year to clean the dungeons, and family was invited over. We'd have a cookout and do a deep cleaning. Family always showed up 30 minutes before the party to have a family meeting, and we would just discuss things that would go on in the family. So and actually I at one point will probably break it out and bore you with it. I had a 3-ring binder with house protocols and house rules and slave positions and, you know, all of the other aspects of leather that you might or might not get interested in if you were involved in a leather house. I'll do a whole video on house positions, because some houses have specific positions, like an armor, a boot black, someone to handle cutlery, rope, a rope technician. There are a number of different butler maid. You know, we'll do a whole video on possible positions within a leather house. But that was a little bit about House Mermaid. It was a grand house. We hosted a play party every month for 6 years, and then a little bit after the 6-year point, mine and Barbie's relationship broke up, and the house kind of dissolved, and the dungeons were disassembled, and I transitioned to a different relationship, which we'll talk about down the road. You know, everybody's leather journey is different. I'm just sharing with you some of what mine was. some of what House Mermaid was. So if you've looked at the memberships on the channel, you'll see that there's a membership level for House Mermaid. And we'll do a future video on what the current House Mermaid is all about and what I envision House Mermaid being or becoming, and you'll have to consider, or hopefully you'll consider, whether you want to be a part of that effort. As always, thanks for watching The Leather Journey.